All right, all right. So let's wait until we get a few more people in here, make sure we get everybody in the live. I'm really excited about today's live Dynamite events and our guest, Christina Lee. Um, Not only is Christina a badass in the social media game, she's helped create amazing communities and build brand awareness for companies like PandaDoc, Open Phone now, and she's been being so gracious with her time and showing us some of the things that she's learned along the way and things that could possibly help you as recruiters build out a better social presence and create better LinkedIn branding, create better connections with your candidates, your clients, and ultimately drive more revenue to that top line. So I'm excited about having Christina in today. But before we get started, I want to just say thank you to our sponsors. Um, uh, we have Apollo.io as a beautiful sponsor of ours. They have been a big partner for the Recruiting with Dynamite for so long. And if you haven't checked out Apollo, they're definitely one of my top tools to definitely integrate into your system. It's one of my biggest tech tools I tell every single recruiter to tap into. Not only do they have intelligence and data enrichment, but searching capabilities that take away the need for things like Sales Navigator in some cases, right? And the ability to quickly go from prospects to outreach as fast as possible. So I'm really excited about today's call, but I think we might have lost our guest. I'll go ahead and wait for a moment while we bring in, we wait for Christina to jump back in. Oh no, we lost her. Oh, it was just there we go. She's back.
Sorry about that. Not sure what happened. The entire computer just went black, and I was like, what in the world? Technical hiccups,
Hey,
everyone.
technical difficulties, they're the best, right? So as I said, guys, I'm excited about bringing Christina on. She actually has the same exact spelling and name as my wife too, so it was really funny when I was talking to her. Uh, she's got a lot in common already. Not only is she from Boston as well, where I went to school, my alma mater, Northeastern, whoop whoop. So I'm excited to have her on. Let's just go in and go into to some of the things that Christina's bringing to the table, right? Not only does she have this great social background, but some of the quick wins that she's been able to accomplish in her, career and why people come to her as the social media guru for some pretty big brands in B2B, like obviously PandaDoc is one of my favorite tools actually. But she came into Open Phone and was able to grow their LinkedIn following by 404%. Now, Open Phone is a big competitor in the SMB space for voice over IP systems. Be able to create really quick phone line distribution systems so that way you can just tap into whatever phone line you need to wherever you are in the world. And they really focus on the SMB market. And so as an unknown player, growing that following by 404% in just a year is pretty amazing. She not only did that, she brought in a TikTok strategy that grew their following from 0 to 6,000 followers in a matter of 6 months. If you're familiar with TikTok, I'm sure everybody is. It's not that easy to grow these days. And again, in a year, she was able to do that on a corporate B2B level. Not only that, but she's helped create a customer social support escalation system that has created a way better customer experience for the people that they serve. So I'm excited about what she's going to bring to the table today and how it's going to correlate to recruiting. I think you're going to hear some really cool stuff here. So thank you, Christina, for joining us today. I'd like to open up the floor for you. Introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, Will. Thanks for having me on here. And more importantly, can I have you come to all of my family events when I need reassurance about my life achievements? Because you did such a swell job for encapsulating all of that. Thank you so much. That was very nice of you. So hi, everyone. I'm Christina. As Will so graciously introduced me, I have a 6 years background in social media marketing, and actually a lot of that ties very closely with recruiting. So I'm excited to join this talk. And funny enough, when you mentioned the TikTok growing, the video that did it for us was regarding jobs. So that,
No way.
yeah, we did a few. We decided to say, like, you know, would our audience on TikTok actually care about a VoIP service, or are they going to care about, you know, maybe coming to work for a remote company? And so we pivot our strategy for that specific platform to be all about recruiting. And they actually garnered, I think our poor recruiting team had like 10,000 applications to go through for one job. And so the power of social, honestly, sometimes.
It it is like the social media game. It's crazy how much it's just changed in regards to the B2B side of things, because you know, you never really saw brands on TikTok, or like specifically B2B brands. Like you saw tons of consumer brands out there, but B2B brands weren't really on TikTok very much. They weren't on Instagram in the past, and I think that's been a big shift, and it's actually helped garner a lot of sales, not just from the perspective of the attention part of it, but it actually like you had brought it up in your in your experience, that you had helped create an escalation process from that experience as well. So like, what are you seeing in that space right now? Like what's kind of the big changes that you're noticing right now?
Yeah, I think so. Years ago, right? Whenever I thought about creating content for social, it has always been to promote the company. It was always like, look at what we're doing. This is why we're great. Like, buy us, pretty much, right? Nowadays, there's a relationship aspect to it, because now with social, you have firsthand experiences with your customers. They now have access to you any given time. When they reach out to support and they don't hear back, where do you think they're going to go? They're going to go to social, and they're going to say, I haven't heard from you guys. What the heck is going on? You know, and more likely than not, they're often going to get a response. It's a very public forum. Everybody can get access to it. And you want to be able to sort of like nurture the relationships on there, because at the end of the day, if people come to your page and they see a slew of angry customers, that's
quick,
probably not a good look. It's a PR nightmare. You know, I say this as a personal avid social user myself, right? Is that citizen journalism has become such a huge thing, and talking about keeping your side of the street clean is imperative when it comes to any business. Social is definitely your first stop for everything. Like, people will probably rely on social feedback before they even go to G2, honestly, you know?
Well, because I think what's really interesting about the cool part about B2B brands that are ahead of that curve is that they've really noticed that. They've really understood that people are becoming more educated before they even buy. I actually just had this kind of situation happen recently, and I actually wrote a post about it. There was a rumor about me that got started because someone asked in a group setting, in a group call, a community or forum, about me, like, oh, who's this Will McGee guy, and is he legit, right? And I luckily had a few people who've worked with me be in the group already, and I had no idea, and they were the ones that told me, like, yeah, all these people were talking mess about me, hadn't even seen any of my stuff, like hadn't even read any of the things that I had done. I had never engaged them before, and they were talking about, like, just in general the problems with coaching and, like, you know, self-betterment in the recruiting industry and all that stuff, right? And because of that, I actually won a deal, because it actually had someone to advocate for me on the social side. But
I always say
really cool.
social is like an amplification for word of mouth nowadays, because it's like, it's no longer just having conversations at an event, right? That conversation leads to other things. People are sliding into DMs. They are sharing posts. They are having these conversations almost 24/7. Like, it's kind of hard to keep up with sometimes with all the noise. But I do see that, like, if people were to just lean in on it a little bit more and actually think of, even for yourself, you know, when you think of like, how do I want to come across? Because at the end of the day, I always say social is very performative, and who you are online is based on how you want people to see you. and as authentically as, we want. People aren't going to see all sides of us, right? But I think when it comes to, like, let's say building your personal brand, for example, there's a very specific approach that people use that I see can benefit their business and their work that they do, their reputation. I actually think it's through social that I've gotten all of my jobs. I haven't updated my resume in, oh gosh, I don't even know, maybe since the first job. It's through LinkedIn, it's through Instagram. Like, I've gotten all my work done from social.
Yeah. And it's funny because, like, A-Talent, that's what one of the big things that we focused on was, that was a big differentiator for us, was we really focused on LinkedIn. We even focused on TikTok at the time. But right when A-Talent started, TikTok was just starting to blow up. It was right. It's pre-pandemic, right? And when I say pre-pandemic, I mean a month before the pandemic. So so it just hit, and it was just getting out. And my wife and I were like, "There's an opportunity here to hit candidates." Like, specifically, we were like, "We're gonna hit candidates. We're gonna, like, get the job boards out, or all of our job postings out via TikTok, and create these, like, really unique videos that tell our story, tell our client's story, and kind of what type of people they want." And it actually worked really well, because we'd create these TikTok videos. Specifically my wife. Luckily, my wife's very beautiful, so she's definitely way easier to look at than I am. So I definitely used it, right? So she came in, and she would do, like, at that time it was, like, all about the TikTok dances and the trends and stuff like that. And so we would do some funny stuff, and and it blew up. And then we just transfer those videos from the editor into LinkedIn, and we actually landed like 3 or 4 clients because of that, of those videos, right? And some of those clients, there's even one of my clients was like, "I just love the way you approached how you were selling your opportunities, and we want that on our side too." So it was really cool. It actually ended up working out for us. But before we get into a lot of that detail, let's go into your story a little bit. How did you get into the social media side? What were some of the lessons you learned along the way? And kind of give us a quick overview of, like, what your journey's been like to get to where today.
Oh man. Well, I feel like I never wanted to work in social media. It was just something that I was an active participant in. And funny enough, I went to college to be a political speechwriter. I had this whole dream about changing the world with my words, as long as I'm not the politician, because that's a whole nother category. And then I got a few internships at the State House. And what was funny was, like, throughout college, I took a bunch of classes with marketing as sort of like, just understanding the principles, basically, and then history and revisionist history. And what I found that I was deeply leaning into was the way people conveyed themselves. And, obviously back then it was for newspapers and broadcasting, and nowadays it's more social. So then during my internships, I worked at the State House, and I ended up running our politicians' social media accounts. And that was my first angle there. And because of that experience, that ended up landing me. Like, I ended up at an event, I had met someone who owned this leather good company. He was like, "Look, I also actually saw you on Instagram. I love the way you do flat lays. Do you want to come work for me?" So I was like, "Yep." And then next thing you know, from there, I was working on creating beautiful photography and of the products that they had. And then I moved there into a fuel company, which was I was actually consulting with them for a while, because, it was a small business. They didn't really understand social in the same way, or that mostly their problem was like, "I need to hire more drivers. I have a problem hiring CDL drivers." And I'm like, "Okay, take me on for a project, and let's see if we could spin this around." And it actually did. We increased their application monthly by 300%, all because of this video, which personalized their drivers a little bit more and made the job a little more enticing. And how I got into the B2B space was because I realized I was not having the fully engaged experience of what it's like to be able to make social impact in a way that was meaningful for myself, meaning the work that I was doing, the company that I was with, was not exactly in line with my moral compass. Working with a fuel company can be a little bit challenging. That being said, so I started applying around, and then, someone had introduced me to one of the hiring managers because I started posting on LinkedIn a lot more. I knew that, hey, this is an angle that if I talked about myself, my work, because how else is anybody ever going to see what you do, right? If I did it a little bit more on LinkedIn, then maybe somebody would take pity on me and invite me in, because at the time I had very little experience and, experience in the B2B space anyway, because I also knew I wanted to work completely remotely. So then the introduction happened. I ended up going into Panadoc. I loved my time at Panadoc. Unfortunately, it was very short because I grew the LinkedIn account so quickly and it garnered a lot of attention, because again, talking about my work and talking about the strategies and like the entire experience, telling that story, I ended up getting a email from our co-founder here at OpenPhone, who was just like, would you like to come to OpenPhone? And, we had a long conversation, and her vision and passion about the product really, it again brings value back to myself. And I've always been the one who is very much of the belief, like, is my work going to make an impact? And if it is, I'm going to go wherever that impact drives, So that's how I ended up here. And so funny that it started out with me not wanting to work in social to now me like talking about it all the time.
I mean, I think many recruiters would kind of feel you on that. I don't think I know a single recruiter that came into recruiting and was like, I want to be a recruiter. And most of us fell into it, right? A lot of us are salespeople or came from, some of us from administrative backgrounds, but most of us are pretty entrepreneurial and kind of just fell into this thing. And if the biggest thing is that we're people, right? I think one of my mentors had said that the true recruiters, the good recruiters, weren't necessarily the prom king or queen, but they were popular in their group, right? Like they were the ones that people kind of like, they could rally a group together and get stuff done, right? And and so we just fell into this, right? So it's what I think some of the most beautiful things happen when you just kind of fall into it and you just allow like kind of life to happen.
Yeah.
Let's get right into it then. So you are approaching social in a way that's kind of building the brand side of things, but you touched on two different parts here, right? There's the personal brand and then there's the corporate brand. So with that, I think a lot of people in recruiting, especially independent agencies and lifestyle recruiters, they're trying to figure out what the difference is, and what should they focus on? Should they be focusing on their personal brand, or should they be focusing on their social brand or their corporate brand? What would you say?
Hot take is it's funny. I feel like I should come in with a hot take, but actually it all boils down to like where you are and where the business goal is, right? And where the business is. So I can use my own personal experience with OpenPhone, for example. When I came in, there was not many chatter about OpenPhone as a brand. So jumping right in and assuming that people are going to listen to whatever it is that the brand is going to say is hard. So we know nowadays that people lean into people. It's always going to be like that. That's just psychological behavior. Like we would rather listen to people tell stories. We don't care about a faceless entity telling us something. So if I were to choose, I would actually tell you that if the company is very small, if you're not like a Pinterest or something, right? Focus on building the personal brands of your employees. Focus on encouraging them to share what it is that they have, because that way it builds some credibility and authority in the things that you're sharing. More so than, just the brand saying, here's our product. You would love to come work for us, right? Like there's just no connection. There's no personal feeling in any way. So definitely, I think, and I actually, even with bigger brands, I find that the bigger brands came to where they are because they had a powerful employee network that's the community effect.
So, and this kind of leads into this community aspect of things, right? So when you're looking at you're building your brand, like, are you actually kind of frameworking this whole thing and have a guided plan to go from like, hey, I'm going to build our personal brand or my personal brand and lead that into community? Is there some sort of structure behind that? And what would you tell someone kind of just starting off right now, looking at social to community to ultimately revenue, because that's what we really are trying to get to, and how that can be a differentiator for you?
Yeah.
Loaded question. I
apologize. No, it's fair. But, I've always said that it should never be a one person job. And even if, like, let's say this person is like me who works in social, right? You could be a team of one, but you could lean into your colleagues and really spread that work out, meaning that, team up closely with your sales folks who are talking to customers, your CSMs and everybody like that. Everybody has a story that they could share about themselves and the work that they're doing, and figure out a way to really like amplify those stories to like one cohesive plan, meaning we're all building this opportunity for the company that we belong to, right? And here's how our work makes that impact. And then coming together, and my framework, which I don't have documented anywhere, my framework is focus on, get a few volunteers that are very much like, hey, I love social, or I don't know much about social, but I am interested. Anybody who's interested, rope them in, rally them in and say, what do you guys want to talk about? And then sometimes people sometimes they need something very prescriptive, where it's like, you're going to post 3 times a week. These are the topics that you can post about. They need that sort of like encouragement. And so, there's that side of things. And the other side of it is people are just like, I just need to go ahead. Just tell me when to post, like, and I will go do it myself. And I actually love those people, because it's like, as your energy is what's going to attract people who come in. What I do want people to stay away from is being too strict with their guidelines, meaning like, if you're going to give a sales tip, this is the structure in which you do your post, and you need to follow this. Don't say this, say this, say this. Then what happens is that people fall into that performative nature of social, where they feel like they have to be somebody they're not. And if we know anything about the world of LinkedIn and everything like that, you can sniff out when somebody is not being themselves. And when that happens, then the trust is broken. And then people are like, okay, well, I'm not going to listen to this. So my suggestion is always like, have that open communication with your team, and then figure out how can you help them, encourage them to do better. And more importantly, get your leadership involved, because something, the leadership, like especially the executive team, they are going to carry the brand to the next level more than I think any other individual. When you can get buy-in from the top and get them to really start being excited, talking and sharing the things that they need to share, that's what's going to contribute to the bottom line. And like, I think about customer experience and everything like that. How many times do you hear in like those sales form at the end where it's like, how did you hear from us? And it's maybe through a person, maybe it's through the brand social account or any of that stuff. But there's always some type of touch point where someone has seen or heard that brand name somewhere. And if you can encourage your employees to talk about it, right, that's free ads right there, just going out. So yeah.
I think one of the hard parts is like, especially with this audience that you're talking to right now, is a lot of us don't have employees, right? So we are independent lifestyle recruiters. Many of us are, or have a boutique agency with like 3 or 4 employees. And yeah, what you're saying is totally valid for somebody that has that at least ecosystem in that regard. How could someone do that maybe on a customer level, or on a client level, or on a candidate level, to a point where, like you said, it doesn't feel like inauthentic, and it can galvanize the work that we've already done as recruiters to encourage even their network or other networks to integrate, or to engage and tap into our community on social?
Oh, figure out the topic that you want to talk about, or that you want to lean into. Sales, for example, if you want to jump into those conversations, there are so many different sales leaders that you can connect with, so many influencers that you can jump. You would be surprised how proactive engagement can often really tie in that network effect, meaning, by you having like throwing in your opinion on something, commenting, even relating to somebody's post, that automatically triggers a familiar face. That's going to be like, okay, I like what this person is saying. I'm going to connect with them, and all this other stuff like that. I think as individuals, it's actually, in my eyes, maybe even easier to build your personal brand versus relying on, having a whole team and everything like that, where you're trying to like go to one single goal. Because as an individual, you can kind of operate in a way that's really uniquely yours, and how you can jump into those, because now you kind of have the authority and the full license to kind of be like, yeah, this is my opinion and I stand by it. And then you're going to start connecting with folks who share those same values, who can like understand. And this isn't to say that you should never, you should never jump into a discourse of some sort where there could be disagreement, because that always leads to the next thing. But I think it's just, I honestly think that would be better.
Yeah.
I think when people are starting out, it's just proactive engagement. Like if you have a community of 0, nobody knows who you are, right? Yeah. Start seeing the folks who you're like, I kind of, and I say this with a grain of salt, because I do want to be mindful that, we shouldn't always emulate influencers. However, top voices are top voices for a reason. They have built a following for themselves because of the things that they share. And like, they have really great, insightful stuff. And you can start seeing the pattern of behavior that they showcase on social. Like you can see, this is how often they post. This is how they engage. You can start picking up those little tactics yourself and work it into whatever you is. So in the beginning, I say explore around, dip your feet in all the conversations, and see how it takes off. Give yourself a goal. Start making, like, use up those LinkedIn connections, the 100 a week. Connect with everybody. Like it's LinkedIn. Who cares? Connect with them.
That's exactly it. That's I tell this to I have a client right now that we're working on kind of their brand voice, and ultimately like who they are, that's the number one thing we do is we first identify kind of your purpose, your why, your vision, your mission, and then we align those things with people who might be in the space that you're in or that have a voice in that space. And I like to borrow people's networks all day long, right? So exactly what you said, by engaging with their posts, being on top of it when they post, because most influencers, most of these people that are doing this, they do have a pattern. They're using a tool or whatever it is, or they're very focused on like the timing that they're posting. So pay attention to that stuff, because when you do that and you're the first one to engage, you're the top of the list. And guess what? Guess who engages with you? That person, right? So Justin Welsh actually talks about this quite a bit, right? I don't know. Are you familiar with Justin Welsh, Christina?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So Justin Welsh, if you guys haven't looked at Justin Welsh, like go look him up. He's one of the biggest LinkedIn influencers and even Twitter influencers in the lifestyle business, right? So his whole thing is all about being a solopreneur, and he actually talks about how building your LinkedIn brand is like one of the best things you can possibly do. And I've been on this road for a very long time. Like Justin wasn't the one that got me into it, but it's really important to kind of see some of the things that he's saying and all these other influencers who are in that space, what they're saying and how they're, because it's not just fluff. It's really something that you can really create value to not just your personal brand, but to your candidates, to your customers, to your clients. And it really can be a differentiator. And I think that's like one of the main things I want to get across to people today is like your brand is your differentiator. Your community, your network, the people who engage with you, people who know you, especially in recruiting, that is your differentiator. And before we had databases, right? That was the big differentiator from recruiting firm to recruiting firm, was the ability to tap into a database of all these resumes and go after them and do it fast and get them right in front of you. Then it turned into relationships, which is now like the bigger thing, right? Like, hey, how well do you know this person? How well can you get them in front of us? How can you convince them to work for us and work with us? Now it's kind of evolved. And I think the biggest differentiator now from big recruiting agencies that don't have that network, and small recruiting agencies that are really niched or really well connected and really tap into their community voice. People like Stu Mitchell, we had him on the last time in October. He's our last guest. Stu created a massive network just talking about the problems and issues of the security profession. And because of that, he now has the ability to go to market so much faster, pick up so many better leads, and pick up so many better candidates because of it. So don't just look at branding as something that, oh, I'm just doing this to do it, but you can actually use this as an asset, as a differentiator, as a feature, as a product of its own. And that can be something that you can use. Influencers do it all the time. So,
They do.
so let's get into this. So how do you look at how do you try and take that brand? So let me take a step back. So we've kind of covered a little bit about how to build a brand for yourself using influencers, using people in the space, tapping into, engaging, and having kind of a topic of discussion, right? I don't want to go into too many details about like how do you find the topics of discussion. I think the basic understanding of that is go out and see what people are talking about if you're curious about this, and then double down on that. If there's a lot of people talking about globalization and the problems with it and hiring, tap into that. If you're in sales and everyone's talking about SDRs not being a thing anymore, go into that, right? So tap
you
into
want to
that.
talk about work-life balance? Talk about that.
Work-life balance, tap into that. So I don't want to dive into that, but how can someone go from creating the brand, having their voice, going into the topics, building an audience, and then converting that? Is there something that you can share to take that from a seamless point where it doesn't feel salesy, it doesn't feel too much? How can someone do that?
Yeah. People are going to want to support the folks that they're most connected with, right? So I see it all the time. I see people starting newsletters and doing all these things. And the reason why that traction ends up growing so exponentially is because people have already started understanding like this person is a legit person. They're not being some fraudster. They're not just trying to gain something out of nothing. I say focus on establishing a posting routine, because you're like a social routine, not just a posting routine, a social routine. And what I mean by that is we talked about proactive engagement, right? We talked about getting out there and joining the conversations, but then there's also that posting aspect where it's like, okay, but only so many people from that post will be able to see what you're saying. Take that information and work it into your own posts. And then that, again, continues the conversation going on. And as you start doing this and you get into the routine and the habit of being online and like just sharing your knowledge out there free, then people are going to start being like, but wait, I want to learn more. Like, what can you tell me more? And like, it's striking that balance between being able to attract that attention and keeping their attention long enough for that they need more out of you. And when you get them to need more, whether it's a job, whether it's more tips, whether it's, even a connection thing, they need to figure out a way to reach out, right? And I always like to, how I end up doing that is like for us, it depends on what my end goal is. So if the end goal right now is for me to, bring in more teammates and everything like that, then I would make sure I am talking about all of the things that people who are looking for a job cares about, and then when they do care about, they're like, well, how do I actually, because that's all people want is they want answers to their questions. And how are you going to be able to provide that? And, having them, whether it's fill out a form, join your website, do whatever it is, as long as they believe in you and the work that you do, they're naturally going to just come. And a simple call to action, honestly, would work. And I find that it is a lot harder when you automatically jump right into the sales mode and not care about like, we haven't established a relationship here at all. Why should I sign up for your nurtuler? That doesn't make sense to me. Why do I want to come work for you? I never even heard of your company. So it's through the stories and through that impact of, nurturing the relationship. That's what's going to get you.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that you kind of brought up too in this is having a goal at the end of the day of like what you're trying to do, because I think a lot of people look at the goal of social as, especially right now in the recruiting spaces, well, why would I spend so much time on it if I can't generate revenue from it, or if my goal isn't revenue? I think a lot of people think that that's the revenue goal at the end of it. I think you need to look at the whole social platform and the whole social engagement as not a goal to get to revenue, but as a stepping stone to get to revenue, right? So what I mean by that, she just brought this up. Christina, you brought this up. You want to answer questions that people are having. So if you really understand your audience and you really understand your niche and your candidate pools and what their problems are in the hiring process or in their day-to-day job and how they can increase their value at the company or whatever it might be, find those topics that those candidates are finding are having a hard time answering, and you answer them for free no matter what, right? In doing that, they can now go, like exactly what you said, I want to learn more about that. So when we did this with A-Talent, we do this now with recruiting with Dynamite. We barely do any I don't think we've done any cold outreach. No, we haven't done any cold outreach. So no cold outreach. We're growing. We barely set up our business model, our true business model, and we've tested everything, and it allowed us to do that because we are just giving education away for free, right? And naturally what happens is I have my inbox is full. If you looked at my inbox right now, I have massive amounts of interest in working with me. How do I do this? What do I do here? How do I get involved in this community? Like, and that's the key, right? Like, that's the ultimate goal. Is all I want is for people to say, hey, what's going on? And I can start a conversation. So it's not the revenue. I'm not looking at it for money. I'm looking at it I want to get people interested enough to almost kind of train them and filter them into a funnel of being like, I now know what I have a problem in, and there's a solution here, and you've given me the solutions, and you've even shown me how to fix it, but I still need a little bit more help. And those are the people I want to work with all day long.
Yeah, and you touched on a really strong point there when you say generating interest, because this is always the problem with social, and this goes, whether it's for a big brand or an individual, is that it's very hard to attribute organic social specifically, right, to the bottom line. But that doesn't mean that there's no impact there, because at the end of the day, if you get rid of all the top of the funnel work, how is anybody going to funnel through? And so I do see social as being sort of like that hand holding to help people down, because honestly, it's like, and it takes a lot too. There's so many touch points in the beginning, where it's like they had to hear from you, and then maybe they hear from it from somebody else. And then it's back to like the content that you're producing. And then it's like, okay, well, this is starting to make sense. This is kind of relatable. And that's the thing too. It's making your content resonate and be relatable with the audience. That's also something that, ends up contributing now. So I also see it as sort of like being a feedback loop consistently, in that, how do you know what you're offering is even what somebody wants? Right. How do you know if it's good? Because you'll hear it. You'll hear when people tell, like, you hear customer candidate experiences all the time. That was a bad candidate experience. Like, that was a bad interview. I will never want to work with this company. And they immediately go to Glassdoor. They go to social. They talk about it with their friends. And that is where you figure out, like, okay, but why was it bad? Oh, I see the problem here. And it's being able to identify those things. And how do you do that? The consistent feedback loop that you create.
And if you're in my coaching program or work with me directly, you'll hear me talk about testing the market all day long. And I think that the companies pay buku dollars for market research firms to go and do some of the stuff that we're just describing right now. And I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars to identify, like, what are the trends? Like, is this product going to do well? Can I create an MVP without, like, if I've created this MVP, that's most minimum viable product. If I created a minimum viable product, will it actually sell? All, like, companies pay tons of dollars for this. Social is your free version of that, because you can start talking about the product and the services and the issues and all that stuff that people are dealing with, and get immediate feedback. And it might take a little bit longer sometimes for some of you, especially if you haven't been on social, but that's why you need to go find those influencers in the space, people who are top voices, engage them, start working with them. And then, well, the funny thing is that a lot of those people who are top voices, if you're actively engaged with them, guess what they're going to do? They're going to actively engage with you, and you can start asking them questions too, because you're helping them. You're giving value to them. You're giving them validation. They're happily wanting to do that for you. I do that with every single one of you. If you ever reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'll happily answer any of your questions. I'll jump on a phone call with you if you're part of the Boom Lab, right? And because you're an active member in my community, and I think that's a big part of that. So to move on, I want to ask some questions around the organization of your of the pools of engagement that you have. Like, is there any tool you're using? Is there any way that you're seeing that's the best practice to not let your social presence and all the engagement that you worked for go underserved or off the radar for you? Are you using anything right now?
Yeah, I think it's easier to manage my personal account where I could just go on the platforms and see the comments as they come through. Although recently my Instagram has gotten a little harder to handle, but from a brand perspective and everything like that, there are a lot of tools out there, and even for solo folks to jump on. Where I use Octopus and Sprout Social in the past to kind of manage inbox messaging. And that's really important because there's like the whole social listening aspect of it as well, where you're really pulling in because let's be real, if we are trying to find out what people are talking about in relations to us, it would probably take forever to skim through everything and manually look for that data, right? So using any sort of social media or social listening tool is really handy. And there are cheap ones out there. I can't think one off the top of my head that's cheap, actually. Now that I just mentioned it, I was like, wait a minute, because social listening is expensive. But
for LinkedIn, Taplio is really good. It's pretty inexpensive. You can actually what's cool about Taplio, and as a shout out to them, is that they actually allow you to like take a post comment or an actual post link, and then pull all the people who've commented on it and engaged with it. And you can put them into now your Apollo or any of your data enrichment platforms and pull that contact data out of it. Now, one of the things that people started once they started realizing that, started hating, and like there's a whole thread on this on LinkedIn about like, don't just go to somebody and be like, I saw you commented on Will McGee's post and it's fantastic. And I agree. Do you want to set up a call? Like, don't do that. That's just like, that will piss people off. But what it does is that you could do that on your posts as well as other people's posts who have similar audiences. And you can start, at least start kind of putting them into some sort of system. Like you don't have to necessarily engage them about that post. You don't have to necessarily reference that post unless it's your own. Reference it all day long. But if it's someone else's post, like find something that's going to add value to that. Be like, hey, like I saw you engage with that and I noticed, and be very personal about it too. Saw you engage with that. You commented about this. Here's like another article if you haven't checked it out, right? So being helpful is, I think, the biggest part of, I think that's the overall overarching part of like social that I think people forget, is that it's not about promoting your brand. You're in essence, promoting your brand is kind of like it's naturally what happens.
It comes with,
it comes with it. If you are being helpful is the biggest part. So I love that.
Social is about socializing, right? We have to always remember that. You got to be social on social for it to work. And you can't always be the town crier and go and be like, look at everything I'm doing. How are you actually being helpful? Like why do I care?
Yeah. I want to open up to the audience. If anybody has any questions, please jump in. But while we're waiting for something like that, I know one of the other questions is, how do you find your topics? Is there any tool that you can use to find topics? Everybody's thinking about ChatGPT and like it giving you topics. And I just haven't really found ChatGPT to be that reliable in that kind of sense, because I think it's old. It's usually older data. It's not what's trending today. Is there anything that someone could quickly figure out, like if there's some questions that they could get answered for their audience particularly?
Yeah, there's so many market trend surveys that come out more recently. Like I even was I was reading Hey Orca's like social media stats on burnout and everything like that, which was actually really interesting, right? Because you find these topics where it's like, okay, you see like 2020 when the pandemic happened, obviously everything was about work-life balance, remote work, and all of these other stuff, and how people separate that from themselves. And I think we had a research team that kind of figured that out. Our entire PR went through this whole, marketing, surveying, But there's so many companies that are doing that. And for myself, what I would suggest, if for other social media managers, because I can't speak for sales or any of that stuff and how they find
Yeah.
their topics, but for myself, I often rely on my social media management tools companies like Octopus and Sprout to be able to share the data that they found, because they are out there trying to figure out what it is that the community generally cares about. And so all you got to do is give them your email, which, I feel like it's kind of worth it where somebody's doing the work for you, better than you paying for somebody else to go out and survey. It's like there are companies who are already doing this for themselves. Hand over your email and then get the results and figure it out from there.
I've used SEMrush too, is another one I really like, because it's just an SEO, search engine management platform, right? It identifies, trending topics in the space. There's another one that's like, I can't think of the name of it. It's like answer this something like that.
Ask the public.
Ask the Public. I was looking for that for one of my clients recently, and I was trying to figure out what the name of it was. Ask the Public is a good one. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. Google Trends also. Now, Google Trends, that's going to be more larger kind of conversations that it's going to be harder to kind of find that, but you can use that. But definitely tap into, like you said, like those tools. Taplio does
I actually
it as
forgot about Ask the Public until you just mentioned it right now. That was actually a really good one. It's so great, especially like if I want to go up there and be like, what are people asking regarding social? It's probably like how to do X, Y, Z. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's just do that. It's so great to formulate your content from that.
You actually just brought up a great point. It's like, I just talked about this with one of my clients, is that at the end of the day, your content isn't about being the expert. It's it's about being helpful. And you got to realize that 99.9% of people don't even know the basics of what you're describing, right? Most people do not know it. So all you're doing is helping them go from unknowing and unaware to kind of like a problem aware, if you will, if we're going to talk about awareness journeys, but just helping them get to that next step. And my last question for you before I let you go, because I know we got time, is like, what's your thoughts on automation and AI now? Like, it's the fastest growing topic in social. It's the thing that everybody's kind of either loves it or hates it. There's tons of gurus on LinkedIn giving tons of stupid advice about it. But, as a professional B2B social influencer, if you will, or social media manager, what would you say about that?
I would say treat it as like any other tool, right? You should never rely on a tool 100%. And more specifically, especially when you're trying to build a brand, I think oftentimes some of the troubles of why people lean into AI is because the ending question is, I don't know what to talk about today. Like they're looking for inspiration, and it's fine to talk to ChatGPT or any other AI tools to kind of help facilitate that, maybe even use them to edit, your grammar. But even so, I just feel like when people just automatically copy and paste, or they rely too much on AI's thing, which often isn't very reliable. And I think nowadays people on social are very adaptive. Like we can spot an ad like that, right? Now you can really start seeing that's ChatGPT produced. Like that's not what's even, please God, never, ever, ever use an AI tool to respond to a comment. Like that is going too far. It's too far. And at some point, we can use these to kind of like make our work life easier, help for inspiration. But when you rely too much for an AI to develop your personality for you, we need to take a break and go.
Your personality.
It's all about your personality.
It's no longer your brand voice. It's no longer your opinion. It's somebody else's opinion.
Yeah.
So I actually use ChatGPT quite a bit. And like, if you follow me enough, like, if you talk to me, I use ChatGPT almost every day. Right. But the difference is that I have it help me kind of create an outline to something like, oh, I'm thinking about this. What do you think about that? Okay, cool. And then having a conversation with it where I say, okay, here's the outline. And then here's the topics I'm going to talk about in this outline. Here's the bait, because I am verbose as hell. I'm ADD as hell. I don't know if you've noticed it in our conversation. I can literally go from topic to topic really quick. And so I use ChatGPT to just like I'm gonna just literally word vomit all over you, and
Mhm.
then can you just distill this for me into a concise point? And so like I use it for that, but
Yeah.
don't use it to, like you said, don't use it to just like create your content. Don't use it just to
No.
create your content schedule. Unless there's, I still haven't seen a tool that I'm like really like
No.
that
And I also think
fantastic.
like with all this too, it's like practice makes perfect. And if you rely too heavily on this tool to kind of recreate you in a way, then it's never gonna work. And you know, especially when you're trying to establish yourself a little bit and build some of that credibility, you don't want to break trust and just sound disconnected because you're too connected to your,
Yeah.
you know, an AI to think for you. But I'm just like you. I use ChatGPT to organize a lot of the process thinking. And again, as free write, sometimes I say things and I'm like, that probably does not sound very good, actually. But then ChatGPT will like, I think what you're trying to say is this. Am I right? And you're like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank
Especially
you
when
for
we're trying to learn new marketing things or sales
yeah.
talk. And like I could never, coming from a very non-traditional tech background, it was very hard for me to kind of understand the jargons and like, you know, things that people were like. So having ChatGPT now to kind of help with those meetings, I'm like, cool, thank you
That's
for
what matters.
summarizing all those points for me. It's very helpful.
And then explaining it to me like I'm a 10-year-old. And that's pretty much it. So
Yeah.
Christina, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you jumping on and sharing your story, sharing your perspective on social and how to grow a brand. And again, getting to the point of like using your social media and your community as a differentiator as you go to your clients, as you go to your candidates, to really get to know them and their problems and connect with them and ultimately just be social. And that's what we are as recruiters. We're pretty much the most social creatures out there. We're engaging everybody at every time of our day. And my wife kind of gets mad at me because I'm like, at the end of the day, I don't want to talk because I'm social
I
all day.
think we can all relate to that.
So again, appreciate you. How can people get in contact with you? Should they want to reach out? Maybe ask you a couple questions, post this.
Yeah, sure. They can find me. All my handles are these chapters. Long story. I'm just an avid book reader. So at these chapters everywhere, LinkedIn,
Okay.
Instagram, TikTok. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, Christina. I hope everyone's having a great week. Enjoy your week. Go out there, try some of these tips right now, so it doesn't just like go on the wayside. You've learned some pretty good stuff here. You should definitely jump in here and go start the whole process, so that way you can become better at social, building that community, and start converting their clients and candidates there. So, have a great day, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah. Bye.